The woman who walked into that church hall wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody had invited her. Nobody had called her. And yet there she stood in the doorway of the Mensa family's grand reception venue in Brampton, Ontario, wearing a gray linen dress and carrying nothing but a manila envelope, and the kind of calm that only comes from a person who has already decided exactly what they're going to do. Her name was Nia Owusu Asante, and the woman across the room who had just loudly announced that the wedding was canceled, that woman went very, very quiet. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. That is always the temptation with a story like this. You want to start at the moment everything changes. The truth is, you have to earn that moment. So let us go back to where it really begins. Nia was 31 years old, and she had been working at the same dry cleaning shop on Kennedy Road for 4 years. She pressed other people's clothes, wedding dresses, men's suits, the kind of gowns that cost more than her monthly rent. She pressed them carefully and wrapped them in plastic and handed them back without any bitterness, because Nia was not a bitter person. She was, if anything, the opposite, one of those people who seem to carry a particular kind of warmth in their chest, the kind that does not dim even when life keeps turning down the lights. She had come to Canada from Accra when she was 22, following her Auntie D, who had sponsored her visa and let her sleep on the couch of a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough for the first 8 months. She had learned to navigate the TTC in winter. She had learned the way Canadians apologize constantly and mean it approximately half the time. She had taken 3 part-time jobs before finding the dry cleaning position, which was stable enough that she could rent her own basement apartment on Danforth. It was small. The ceiling was low, and the radiator made a sound like someone knocking from another room. But it was hers. She had a picture of her mother on the refrigerator. She had a small pot of aloe vera on the windowsill. She was, by most honest measures, doing fine. She met Kwaku Asare at a Ghanaian community event at a church hall in Mississauga. He was laughing at something his friend had said, and the laugh was so genuine, so unguarded, that Nia looked twice. He was tall and wore glasses that he kept pushing up his nose. He worked as a civil engineer for the city of Mississauga. He had a warm handshake, and he brought her a small plate of kalewale without being asked because he had noticed she hadn't made it to the food table yet. That was the thing about Kwaku. He noticed people. They dated for 2 years. It was not always easy. Kwaku worked long hours, and Nia's shifts at the shop were early, but there was a steadiness to what they had that Nia had never felt before. He made her laugh. He remembered things. He called her mother in Accra on her mother's birthday, unprompted, just to introduce himself properly. When he proposed, he did it in Auntie Deed's kitchen, with the family around, because he said he wanted witnesses. Nia said yes before he finished the sentence. Kwaku's mother, Madame Abora Asare, lived in a large house in Oakville. Nia had met her exactly 3 times before the engagement, and each time had felt the way you feel when you walk into a building, and immediately sense that the temperature is wrong, not cold enough to name, not warm enough to relax in. Just off. Madame Abora was a woman of great precision. Her house was precise. Her clothing was precise. The way she poured tea was precise. She had come to Canada in the 1980s with almost nothing, built a real estate portfolio that now stretched across 3 provinces, and she spoke about this history often. Not as gratitude, but as evidence. Evidence of what she had earned. Evidence of what she deserved. She received Nia with the manners of a woman who had been trained to receive guests graciously, and the eyes of a woman who had already made up her mind. The first dinner was polite. The second dinner was cooler. The third dinner, after the engagement was announced, was when Madame Abora finally said what she had been building toward. Kwaku had stepped out to take a call. It was just the two of them at the dining room table in Oakville, with the chandelier above them and the winter dark pressing against the windows. "You seem like a nice enough girl," Madame Abora said. She set down her fork. "I want you to understand that what I'm about to say, I say out of love for my son." Nia waited. "Kweku has worked very hard. He has a future that I have invested in. The woman who becomes his wife must be a partner in that future, not," she paused, choosing the word carefully, "a dependent. I support myself," Nia said, keeping her voice level. "You press clothes on Kennedy Road," Madame Abora said. It was not said with cruelty exactly. It was said the way someone might point out a flaw in a building plan, factually. As if emotion had nothing to do with it. Nia said nothing. "I am prepared to be generous," Madame Abora continued. "I have a friend in London, Ontario, who runs a restaurant. I can arrange a position for you. A fresh start. Kweku will find someone more suitable, and you will have a salary, a reference, and enough to go back to Accra if you prefer." She opened the small clutch bag beside her plate and set an envelope on the table between them. "This is to help with the transition." Nia looked at the envelope. She did not touch it. "I love your son," she said. "Love," Madame Abora said, and the word in her mouth sounded like something she was returning to a shop, unwanted. "Love does not build a future, my dear." Kweku came back. The envelope disappeared into the clutch bag. Madame Abora smiled and asked if anyone wanted more plantain. Nia did not tell Kweku immediately. This was, perhaps, her first mistake, though anyone who has ever loved someone and feared what the truth might cost them will understand the silence. She carried it for 3 weeks, during which time she pressed wedding dresses and men's blazers and tried to sleep at night. She told him on a Tuesday. They were in his car, parked outside her apartment building on Danforth, and she told him everything, the envelope. London, Ontario. "Kweku will find someone more suitable." Kweku sat with it for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to talk to her. Kweku, she's my mother. I'll handle it." He did talk to her, and whatever was said in that Oakville house, the result was not reconciliation. The result was a cold war. Madame Abora stopped returning Kweku's calls with her usual promptness. She skipped the engagement dinner they had planned at Auntie Didi's. She sent a card that said congratulations in an elegant, distant hand, as if she were congratulating an acquaintance. And then she started calling Kweku's cousins. The cousins came in waves, and they were varied in their approach. Kweku's cousin Bediako called to say he'd heard Nia was not serious, without being able to explain who had told him this or what it meant. His cousin Vivian, who was closer, met Nia for coffee in downtown Toronto and said carefully, diplomatically, that she hoped Nia understood what she was getting into, that Auntie Abora has very specific expectations, that sometimes it is easier to. And then she stopped herself and said, "Never mind, drink your coffee." The wedding was set for October. A Saturday in Brampton at a hall that Nia and Kweku had booked 8 months in advance. Auntie Dide was making jollof. They had a DJ who was also a cousin of someone. It was not going to be a grand affair, and they had never wanted it to be. 2 weeks before the wedding, Kweku's youngest cousin, a boy of 19 named Otto, who had clearly been put up to it, called Nia at work and told her that Madame Abora had proof that Nia had lied on her original immigration documents. Nia hung up the phone. She stood there behind the counter of the dry cleaning shop with the smell of steaming fabric around her, and she thought, "This is what this has become." She called Kweku. He did not answer. He was in a site meeting. She pressed 3 blazers. She thought about her mother in Accra. She thought about the aloe vera on the windowsill. She thought about Essenham. Essenham Quaynor. They had grown up 3 streets apart in Accra's Le Bon neighborhood. They had attended the same school from age 7 to 17. They had shared textbooks and secrets, and, Once in secondary school, the same terrible stomach illness from a street vendor's kelewele that had them both lying on the floor of Essenham's mother's house for 2 days, laughing about it even as they were miserable. Essenham had come to Canada first. She had gone to Dalhousie, then articled at a law firm in Halifax, then moved to Toronto 4 years ago. They had stayed close for a while. Phone calls, the occasional visit, and then, the way it happens sometimes, the calls had become less frequent. Life had moved in different directions. Essenham had been made a junior partner at her firm. Nia had settled into her Danforth apartment. They still liked each other's posts. They still texted on birthdays. But they hadn't spoken properly in almost 2 years. Nia looked at her phone. She thought about calling. She thought about how much time had passed. She thought about whether she had any right to reach out now. With everything that was happening, after 2 years of birthday texts and nothing else, she put the phone down. She picked up the next blazer. She put the phone down again. She called at 9 p.m. that night, standing by the radiator in her basement apartment, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Essenham picked up on the second ring. Nia. Just her name. No surprise, no cool distance, no "oh, it's been so long." Just her name, the way you say someone's name when you've been expecting them to call. "I need help," Nia said. And then she started to cry, which she hadn't planned to do at all. Essenham was quiet on the other end. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say. The quiet of someone who is listening carefully, taking it in, filing it. "Tell me everything," Essenham said. So Nia did. The dinner table, the envelope, London, Ontario, the cousins, the phone call about the immigration documents. When she finished, there was a pause. "The immigration document claim," Essenham said. "That's the part that matters legally. Do you still have all your original paperwork?" "Yes. I keep it in a binder." "Good." Another pause. "Nia, has she actually filed anything? Has anyone contacted you officially? Government, IRCC, anything?" "No." "Then right now it's a threat. People make threats." Essenham's voice was calm and precise. "I want you to send me everything. Your original application, your work permit history, your PR confirmation, all of it. Send it tonight." "Essenham, I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask," Essenham said. "I'm telling you. Send me the documents." What Nia did not know, what she would not learn until much later, was what Essenham had done after they hung up that night. Essenham had sat at her kitchen table in her apartment near King West, with Nia's documents spread across the table, and worked for 3 hours. She had found nothing wrong. Nia's immigration history was immaculate. Every form filed correctly, every deadline met, her permanent residency granted without a single issue. The claim about fraudulent documents was not just wrong, it was fabricated. But Essenham had also made a phone call. Her firm had recently handled a cross-border real estate matter for a client whose family Essenham had come to know. A client whose father had deep, quiet connections in several West African governments and whose family's influence in the Ghanaian Canadian community was the kind of influence that is never announced because it doesn't need to be. The client's name was Nana Ama Frimpong. They had become friends over 18 months of working together. And when Essenham called her and explained what was happening to her childhood friend 2 weeks before her wedding, Nana Ama had listened, and then she had said quietly, "I'll come." Essenham had said, "You don't need to." "I want to," Nana Ama said. "I'll come." The wedding day arrived the way wedding days always do, all at once, before you are ready. Nia got dressed at Auntie Dida's house. Auntie Dee did her hair and cried a little, and told her she looked like her mother. The dress was ivory with gold embroidery along the hem, and Nia had found it at a shop in Kensington Market and altered it herself by hand over 2 evenings on the living room floor. Kwaku was already at the hall with his groomsmen when the call came. His mother's voice on the phone was composed and terrible. She was not coming to the wedding. More than that, she had spoken to the hall's management and raised a legal concern about the booking. Something about a contract dispute. The hall's manager, who clearly wanted no trouble, had called Kweku to say there might be an issue with the venue. It was 90 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin. Kweku called Nia. He kept his voice steady, but she could hear the thing underneath it. "I'm handling it," he said. "We're handling it. Don't panic. Don't panic." She stood in Auntie D-Day's bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror in the ivory dress with the gold hem, and she thought, "I have done nothing wrong. I have done nothing wrong. I have done nothing wrong." She called Essenum. "I know," Essenum said. She had already heard. Nana Ama had already heard. "Get to the hall. We're already on the way." The Asare Owusu wedding guests arrived to a scene of some confusion. The hall's manager, a nervous man named Gary who wore a blue lanyard, was standing at the entrance having a low, urgent conversation with Kweku and two of Kweku's groomsmen. Several elderly aunties had arranged themselves on a bench near the door, with the patience of women who have seen worse. The DJ was inside, testing his speakers, happily unaware. Madame Abora arrived at 12:45, 20 minutes before the scheduled ceremony. She came with Bediako and Vivian, and two other people Nia didn't recognize. She was dressed beautifully, a deep burgundy kente-trimmed suit, perfectly pressed. She looked like a woman who had prepared for this moment. She walked up to Gary the manager and said, in a voice loud enough for the gathered guests to hear, that this venue had been double-booked and that the contract her family had filed that morning, apparently, with a lawyer's letterhead attached, superseded the one Kweku and Nia had signed 8 months prior. Gary looked at the paper. He looked at Kweku. He looked at the paper again. The guests murmured. Auntie Dide gripped her handbag. Nia stood very still, and then a sound came from the car park. 3 black SUVs pulled into the lot in a quiet, unhurried line. The kind of vehicles that carry people who do not need to announce themselves. The lead vehicle parked first. The doors opened. Essenum got out of the second car, wearing a structured navy blazer and carrying a leather folder. She walked to Nia and touched her arm briefly. Just a touch, just "I'm here." And then she turned toward the entrance. The woman who got out of the first SUV was Nana Ama Frimpong. She was 36 years old, and she wore a pale gold wrap dress and small diamond earrings, and she walked like a woman who is always, in every room, exactly where she intended to be. Her family's name was known in Toronto's Ghanaian community the way certain names are known. Not from newspapers, but from the quiet fact of what they had built and what they had given and what they had never needed to boast about. She stopped in the doorway of the hall. The room, which had been getting louder with tension, went quiet. Madame Abora turned. The two women looked at each other. Madame Abora clearly recognized her, and something happened in Madame Abora's face, something small but impossible to miss, a recalibration. "Madame Asare," Nana Ama said. Her voice was pleasant. "I don't think we've been formally introduced. My name is Nana Ama Frimpong." She didn't add anything to the name. She didn't need to. "I understand there's a concern about the contract for this venue." Essenum stepped forward and opened the leather folder. "I have a copy of the original booking contract, signed 8 months ago, along with correspondence confirming payment in full. I also have," she paused, and the pause was precise and intentional, "a letter from our firm, addressed to the hall's management, clarifying that any contract filed this morning would be legally invalid as it was executed under false premises and in bad faith, and that we are prepared to file for an injunction if this venue is not made available to our clients immediately." She held out the letter to Gary. Gary took it with the expression of a man who wishes he had called in sick. Madame Abora said nothing. One of the people she had brought, the lawyer, presumably, leaned close and said something quietly. She listened. Her face did not change, but she said nothing. "Thank you, Gary," Nana Ama said pleasantly, as if they had just concluded a routine business exchange. Then she turned to Kweku's mother, and her voice was still pleasant, still calm, still carrying absolutely no heat, which somehow made it worse. "I've known Nia Owusu Asante since her best friend told me about her 8 months ago. I've reviewed her immigration file personally. It is perfect. I want to be sure you are aware of that, so that we don't have any further misunderstandings." Madame Abora looked at Nia. Nia looked back. There was a long moment in which the entire history of that year, the dinner table, the envelope, London, Ontario, the cousins, the phone call, the 2 weeks of dread, hung in the air between them. Then Madame Abora straightened her kente trim jacket. She looked at Bediako. She looked at the ground. And she walked back to her vehicle. The guests broke into noise. Auntie Dee was crying. One of the older uncles laughed and said something in Twi that made everyone near him laugh too. The DJ, still unaware of anything, chose that precise moment to test the sound system with a burst of high-life music, and somehow that was the thing that broke the tension completely. Everyone laughed at once. The laughter of people who have been frightened and are suddenly, furiously, gratefully, no longer frightened. Kweku and Nia were married at 2:15 that afternoon. The jollof was extraordinary. Auntie D-Day had been cooking since the previous morning. The DJ played until the hall's staff started stacking chairs around them. A great uncle gave a toast in Twi and then summarized it in English as, "She is good, he is good, may they be good together," which was received as the profound thing it was. Nia danced with Essenham at some point in the evening, in the middle of everything, and neither of them said much because there was too much to say, and the music was too loud, and neither of them is really a person who makes speeches. Essenham leaned close and said, "You should have called me sooner," Nia said. "I know. Why didn't you?" Nia thought about it. "I didn't want to need help." Essenham pulled back and looked at her. "Nia, I needed help with my OSAP forms in 2nd year, and you drove 3 hours to Halifax to sit with me. In February, in your auntie's car that had no heat, the heater worked. Sort of. Ah, it did not work. One side worked. They were both laughing now. The kind of laughing that is also something else, something older and more complicated and more true. Later, near the end of the night, Nana Ama found Nia near the dessert table. She had stayed for the whole reception, which Nia had not expected. "Thank you," Nia said. "I don't know how to." Nana Ama shook her head. "Essenham has been a good friend to my family. She talked about you for months before you called her." "Did you know that?" She smiled. "She told me about you long before any of this." Nia didn't know what to say. People who are good to others when it costs them something. Nana Ama said simply, "Those people deserve to have someone show up for them." She picked up a piece of chin-chin from the dessert table. "Now go find your husband. You're neglecting him." Madame Abora did not attend the reception. She called Kweku 3 days later. Nia was not in the room for that call and did not ask for a full account. What she knows is that Kweku came out of the bedroom afterward, looking like a man who has put something down that he has been carrying for a long time. He sat down next to her on the couch. He took her hand. "She's not going to be easy," he said. "I know," Nia said. "We're going to have to figure it out. I know that too." He looked at her. "Are you okay?" She thought about the question honestly. She thought about the dress on the floor of the Kensington Park shop, the aloe vera on the windowsill, the radiator that sounds like knocking, the picture of her mother on the fridge. She thought about a car with a heater that only worked on one side, driving through a February that had no business being as cold as it was. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. "Now, If you are watching this and you are thinking about the friend you haven't called in too long, the one you've been meaning to reach out to but keep telling yourself it's been too long now, it would be strange. Call them. It is not too late. It is never as late as you think. Real friendship does not expire. It waits, patient as water, for the moment you remember it is there. And if this story meant something to you, stay with us. There are more stories like this one. Subscribe so you don't miss them. Because the next one, you are going to want to hear it from the beginning.